So last chapter seems so easy, right? We simply design our ideal audience journey and then we simply wait for them to go and follow it. But how can we be sure that they will? Through this, we can't. So what do we do now? We will use a technique called match on attention. And the first thing we need to do is to identify the different points of interest within each wall. Essentially, those elements that will attract audience attention. Bear in mind that it's not good to have too many points of attention in each wall because in a way they will cancel each other. So also when identifying points of interest, I try to be super specific. So for example, in my first wall, my starting scene is that the user is facing the match. But instead of just writing down the match, I try to think further. So for example, in my case, I think that probably my audience is going to be looking at the quarterback because it's probably the player that has more visibility and more relevance within that game. So let's go and do this for every world. So let's look into my first world. As you can see, there is 5 actions, but I only spotted 3 points of interest. The first one is going to be when the audience is watching the match. And as I said earlier, I think the element that's most likely to grab their attention is the quarterback. And here I want to give you an example of why understanding the points of interest is so important. Because, for example, if I wanted people to notice something that's on a corner of the field, I could use the quarterback and make that character run towards that point. So I could be sure that a lot of the people is going to look there. Looking back into my points of interest, my second one will be when I am listening to Mike. His voice tone is going to catch my attention because I'm going to make sure that this is quite special and also quite loud. As you can see, points of interest can be visual but also oral. And thirdly, when I am looking into the sky, then the colors of the eclipse are going to be vibrant, and I'm quite likely that in a otherwise dark sky, that's probably going to catch their attention. In my second world, I have selected only 2 points of interest. The first one is in the entry action when I am looking at the picture. And I think that probably people is going to be interested in seeing the different point of view that they have from that scene from the viewer's perspective rather than when they were inside that wall. Secondly, I have also placed a point of interest and action of follow Mike because I imagine that he's going to be quite excited and behaving quite strangely, so that's quite likely going to catch the audience attention. In my third wall, I've only placed 2 as well. The first one is for the control system, and I think that the audience is probably going to be interested in looking at the screens with all the space information. Also, when I am looking at the space from the window, I can imagine that I'm gonna put like bright, shiny, big planets coming closer, and that's probably gonna be the thing that catches their attention. And from the fourth wall, the moon, I've placed 3 points of interest. The first one is that when I am looking at the Earth from the moon, probably the size of the Earth is going to be quite striking, so that's probably gonna grab my attention. Then when I am watching Mike and Sarah's kissing, probably I'm going to be more interested in Sarah's reaction because I'm going to make sure that she's giggling and doing some stuff. So the audience at least notices that this is happening, even if, as you can see, this is a nice to have action, so it's not really relevant to my narrative. And finally, when I meet the alien, I think that people is going to be mostly interested in looking at his body because it's going to be quite different from a human one. So now that we know the points of interest for the different worlds of our story, it's quite easier for us to imagine how the attention of the audience is going to be shifting around the wall and the different actions that are happening. Also, to make sure that one point of interest is the last one of a world and the first one of the next one, it's a very good technique to create seamlessly transitions. So you don't always need to do that because at the end there is no right and wrong. This is just a tool so you can understand the shift of attention of the audience and make decisions based on that. But let's look at my example of how that will look like.
So let's look at my story. And here I am looking at the first transition between the stadium to the NASA headquarters. The first thing that I need to do is to line up the last action of the first wall, which was look for the eclipse and take the picture, with the first action of the second wall, which was look at the picture of the eclipse. So I line them up, and as you can see, the point of interest is the same. It's going to be a change of point of view, but essentially the users are going to be engaged with the same thing in that transition. So it's going to be quite smooth. Looking at the second transition from the NASA headquarters to the spaceship, here again I lined up the last action of the second wall, which I am engaging on Mike's and Sarah's conversation, with the first action of the third wall, where I am in the control system just in front of the controllers. Therefore here I establish my second transition. Here, as you can see, it's not really smooth and the point of interest is not matching at all. But as I said, there is no right and wrong. At the end, it's a decision of the creators. And what I believe is that since Sarah is going to be telling you about the spaceship, your imagination is going to be already anticipating how it will look like. So as she's talking, you will already be seeing the spaceship appearing. So I think though, despite it's not really the same visual point of interest, in a way it's an aural connection between the both walls, so I think the transition will work quite well. Looking at the third wall, here I'm looking to create a quite special transition, because you in the last wall will be looking at the moon from the window, and when you enter the fourth wall you will be looking at the earth from the moon. Therefore it's quite a special transition, but I think it's going to be really poetic and really beautiful. So this is how I am planning to transition to finally to the moon. But are points of interest enough to be sure that our audience is going to follow the experience as we expect them to?
Don't worry, because we have within our hands a very powerful tool, the cues. Cues will help us reinforce existing points of interest or create new ones. And with their help, we can actually increase the percentage of people that's likely to engage with the action we want them to. Beware, though, of not abusing of cues, because that might result in a decreased sense of presence of your audience, feeling that the experience they are living is not so real as it could be. But let's look at the type of cues that we have. We have oral cues. So, for example, if I wanted you to look in that direction, I could put a very loud or a quite special sound coming from that direction. It could either be a song or whatever that I want to use, so you look in that direction. Then we also have the visual cues, and visual cues could be like in a white wall, for example, like this one. If I add bright colors into the corner of it, you likely look there. But this also works in a VR environment, because maybe if I set like a glowing fire in a corner, that's probably gonna glow, and this is something that I can perceive even if it's not exactly in my field of vision. And secondly, we can also use a host. In my story, it would likely be Mike. So I could use Mike to walk towards the place that I want my audience to walk to. And also something that works very well, if it's all the characters in a VR scene turn to look at that direction, you are very likely to also turn and look into that direction. So let's look into my story, into my festival. Here, the cue I've used is aural, and it's Mike that's going to be actually calling me. His voice is going to start getting stronger and closer, because I really want you to listen to what Mike has to say, because otherwise I think it might be very difficult for the audience to notice the clips. In my second wall, so because I want you to engage on Mike's and Sarah's conversation, I'm going to make sure that the rest of characters that are in that scene is turning around to look at them. So I'm quite sure that you're probably gonna look at them as well. For the third wall, I've added no cue, because what I'm going to do actually is that my key action is that you look at the moon from the window. But what I'm going to do is, instead of making you turn your head around and look at it, I'm actually going to place the moon just in front of you. So I need no cue for that. And in my fourth wall, and I want you to meet the alien. So one thing that I'm going to do to make sure that you actually meet him is that he's going to have a bright and shiny body, so it glows and it attracts your attention, as well as he's going to make heavy noises when walking. So I have done all my work for my story. I have identified all the points of attention. I've added all the relevant cues. Now, what I want to do is to show you how I think that the user attention will finally navigate through my whole experience from wall one to the last one. Let's look at it. So here is how I think that most people will flow or navigate through my experience. They will appear in the first wall and they will be looking at the match. Then they might likely look through their camera if they notice it, and they will also maybe notice Mike taking some pictures. They may engage with an earlier conversation with Mike at some point, but after, I don't know, 3 minutes, this is when Mike is going to start calling you because I really want you to listen to what he has to say about the eclipse. After hearing him, you're gonna likely be looking into the sky looking for the eclipse. And when the picture is taken, you're going to appear in the NASA headquarters looking straight at the picture that Mike just taken at the game. Once you're in the NASA headquarters, you're going to be able to walk around the corridors, observe the other pictures. There might be some scientists in the event, so you might engage in their conversations about some conspiracy theories or whatsoever. I have to think more about this. But later, Mike is going to be given the award and everyone is going to be applauding him. And later on, I will make sure that everyone watches Mike and Sarah talking, so you do the same as well. And you hear how Sarah invites you and Mike to join her in a spatial trip to the moon. And while she's explaining that and your imagination is anticipating what it will look like, you are already in the control system of the spaceship. What can you do in the spaceship? In the spaceship, I'm sure that you first might want to see all the screens on the control and also look through the window and see all the planets that are coming closer and they have like bright and shiny colors. And at some point, I'm going to place the moon just in front of your field of vision. And at that moment, you're going to be landing in the moon. And from the moon, you're actually be looking at the Earth. You might be a bit confused at the beginning, but I think that's going to be an interesting experience for you. Once you're in the moon, you will be able to have few minutes to walk around the moon and just feel what it will actually be like to be in the moon. Then you can also see that Mike and Sarah are kissing, but this is just a side action for you in case you are curious and you want to look at them. But what I really want you to do in this last wall to so as to finish my experience is to meet the alien. The alien, as I said, he's going to have a body with bright colors that's going to attract your attention as well, and he's gonna walk heavily, so it makes a lot of noise and you notice him. Finally, you'll meet the alien who will share with you his dream, which is to go to the Earth. The end. Now it's time for you to go and do the same. In the first place, identify the different points of interest that exist within each wall. Later, add any relevant cues when needed. And finally, join all your walls together to have the big picture of your experience. Remember that there is no right and wrong. This tool is designed to help you understand how your experience plays together from an audience perspective and help you make decisions. So go ahead, join your walls, and I'm looking forward to seeing all your stories. Thank you.